just to make everybody aware, we do have some of the students and youth that we serve are listening in on this call. And so I do just want to say at the forefront, what we do as leaders in the community, as transformative leaders, everything we do is being witnessed by our children and by our youth and our emerging leaders in the community. So with that in mind, I am so excited for us to be able to do this. I do want to let everybody know that unfortunately I can't stay for the majority of the time, but I did want to provide that introduction. And Kevin, I do want to pass it to you in case there's anything I missed. I know that you were going to quickly overview some of the things we're going to highlight today.
Yes, thank you, Christian. So my name is Kevin Mowong. I'm the Executive Director for Solidarity. Like Christian was saying, we work in the same communities, and this is an issue that's been really near and dear to my heart. I know a lot of young adults and students that have DACA, so I'm really excited for our two presenters today, Bethany and Christy, who will be joining us and giving us a lot of education on the subject, a reason for our hearts to be moved in a certain sort of way. And then what I'm really excited about are just a few key points, easy ways for us to become allies for our immigrant neighbors in the city. First things first, I want to do a little housekeeping here. So in the chat, as you guys have been using that, feel free, if you know anybody over there, say hi to them, connect with them on that time. That's what the chat is for. But if you're trying to ask questions of our panelists and our experts here today, please use the Q&A button that's on the bottom of your screen. In the Q&A, you can actually write any sort of question. And then if you see a friend's question or somebody else's question that you really enjoy, just like it. And that'll move that question up to the top so that we'll know to answer that. We're going to have a 10-minute Q&A at the very, very end. But as our presenters are presenting, the other person who's not talking in that moment will be answering quick questions if there's anything that they can quickly address. And if there isn't anything else, we'll cover that at the very end. The other thing that I wanted to do was start us off with a poll. We'd like to know just a little bit of, what was your experience with DACA? What brought you to register for this webinar? And I forgot my third question. What is it? It is, how'd you learn about this webinar? So some quick and easy things. The poll should be up. Christian, can you confirm it is up? Oh yeah, there we go. Look at
I have it up on my end here.
Also, I am seeing a ton of people from Colorado. This is freaking awesome. I love that we're being able to reach out to there. A few people from North County, South County. A lot of Fullerton friends. We love you guys out there. I'm getting a lot of sarcastic remarks from our friend Jason Phillips in Fullerton in the chat. Uh-oh. Christina says that she's unable to push submit for the poll. We're seeming to get some answers. I'm going to let this poll run for just a little bit longer. Currently, for what is your experience with DACA, I am close to someone who has DACA is the #1 response so far with 14.
Krista says she's unable to push submit on the poll. Is that a
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see. So if you don't, so it'll show the first two questions. If you don't scroll down, then you won't see the third question or the submit button.
Thank you, Christian. All right, get your answers in. We're going to close this in 10 seconds. And for the question number 2, want to know how to be a better ally for the immigrant community is one of the top responses for why, what brought you to this webinar. We appreciate that. Yeah, make sure you answer all 3 questions. Thank you for clarifying that, Krista. All right, I'm gonna end the poll. Thank you guys for taking that. It's very helpful on our end. Okay, so I'm going to pass this over to Bethany and Christy. Bethany is the Director of Camino Immigration Services, which is an initiative of Solidarity. It's a legal services that is actually in Placentia, California, but serves all of Orange County for any sort of immigrant services that we need. She's DOJ accredited representative. And then also on our panel is Christy White, our lead attorney at Camino Immigration Services. So give a little hand clap for them if you can. And I'm going to pass it over to Christy first, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to
Thanks.
share the screen too.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for joining with the seminar today. I know that when you're talking about legal things, it can be pretty complicated. So one of the first issues we thought would just be great would be to establish what is DACA and what is the timeline of what has happened with DACA. So first, there's just a ton of misconceptions still out there about what DACA is and what it isn't. If you go on any social media platform anywhere and DACA gets brought up, you will see a number of times where people will say, well, why don't they just apply for citizenship? If they've been here this long, why don't they do something about it? The history of our immigration situation and system is so complex. We could have a 3-hour seminar just on that. So I just want to briefly tell you what DACA is and reiterate the truth is that most people who have DACA do not qualify for any other type of immigration relief. So there's not a situation where they are refusing to apply for something or simply being lazy. It means that they don't have any other relief they can apply for. And the history of DACA started way back in 2001. And back in 2001, several members of the US Congress actually wrote and put on the floor for a vote something called the DREAM Act. And that was to help people who had been brought here as children. Well, from 2001, almost 20 years later, that no act has ever been passed by Congress. So in 2012, President Obama had pushed Congress to once again pass something similar to a DREAM Act, and Congress had refused to act. At that point, he directed his Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano, to create something that was essentially what we call prosecutorial discretion. So briefly in numbers, and Bethany probably will go more into this, but we have, best estimate is we have about 11 million people in this country undocumented. And we have the resources to approximately deport or remove about 400,000 per year. So just on a numbers game, if you look at it from the government's point of view, if they really did want to remove every single person in the country who was undocumented, it would take years and years and years to remove everyone who was here. And that's assuming no other person entered that was undocumented. So just with the numbers, it's fiscally and just impossible for the government to do it. So President Obama said, okay, well, what are our priorities? If we have this amount of funding, what are our priorities going to be to remove people? And he decided that the lowest priority should be people who were brought here as children and who have no criminal records. So that's where DACA came from. So DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. This is no path to citizenship. This is not a legal status. This is simply the government saying, we know you're here, we see you, and you are the lowest priority for removal. So while you're here, we will give you a work permit and a valid social security number. And the attempt was to basically pressure Congress to then pass a DREAM Act to give dreamers a permanent solution, which has still not happened. So in 2012, June 15th, President Obama announced what DACA would be and who would qualify. And those requirements still remained that you had to be 15 years old when you submit your application for DACA. So you can have a 9-year-old who meets all these requirements, but is still not going to be eligible to apply for DACA unless they were in removal proceedings currently, which means they had the threat of deportation looming over them immediately. You also had to be under the age of 31 on the day that President Obama announced DACA. That means that some of our DACA recipients are now pushing 40. Because they were, say, 30 and it's been 8 years since DACA was announced. So this idea that DACA is only young people or people who are in high school is very much a misnomer, because you actually have to be 15 to apply. And if you applied and you were 30 in 2012, you're now 38. You had to have proof that you have resided continuously in the United States since June 15th of 2007. So when this initially, came about, they had to show the presence from 2007 to 2012. Now, where we're at, you would have to show proof from 2007 all the way to 2020, and that you have continuously resided in the United States. You had to have entered the United States before your 16th birthday. You have to show that you were physically present in the United States with no lawful status on June 15th of 2012. You had to be enrolled in high school, in college, or have completed them and have a diploma or a GED, or you were honorably discharged. What is not on here on this slide, it also is you could not have been convicted of 2 or more misdemeanors or what they called a serious crime. So that's really important to know. When you hear things in the news, and I have a couple of sites, if people want them at the end, we can send them out, but of that DACA recipients, how many, the percent have been convicted of crimes, when you delve into it, it's actually way, way lower than a documented population. And on top of it, most of the crimes are for immigration violations, meaning they were, picked up at the border when they tried to enter as a child, and or, very minor things that most teenagers kind of get into trouble with. So you want to advance the next slide? Great. So now the question is, so that is DACA. That was DACA that was set up by President Obama under the direction of the Department of Homeland Security. Now, where I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but from a legal perspective, what's confusing is what's going on currently with DACA and what was the Supreme Court decision. So we want to just give you a little background so that when you're speaking about it, you can speak about it knowledgeably and with the truth on your side, especially if you're going to advocate with people who maybe aren't so sure about what DACA is or is not. Again, it's no legal status. It's not a permanent path. It was simply a work permit and a social security number so that people could work and stay without the fear of deportation, while hopefully Congress made, a path to citizenship for this group of individuals. When President Trump took office, shortly thereafter in September 2017, he directed his attorney general at the time, Jeff Sessions, and then Jeff Sessions wrote a memo which directed the Department of Homeland Security to begin to rescind DACA. A motion or a memo was filed saying why they were going to rescind DACA. So this is very important in the legal context of how this happened, because the Department of Homeland Security created the program of DACA, or this deferred action. Then the Department of Homeland Security had to be the ones who canceled it or rescinded it. This has been in court since the day that they attempted to rescind it. We have had different jurisdictions making different decisions, and it was very confusing whether it was going to go forward or not go forward, and it was dependent on the jurisdiction you were on. So finally, the Supreme Court of the United States agreed to hear the case, and they granted certiorari, which means they allowed the case to move forward to them to decide what was going to happen. Those arguments were heard in 2019, and just June 18th of this year, we finally received the written opinion of the Supreme Court, which a majority of justices decided that President Trump and the Department of Homeland Security are able to rescind DACA. So it's very, very important that people hear that. The Supreme Court did not save DACA. What they decided was the president is able to cancel DACA, but the way he did it was in violation of the APA, which is the Administrative Procedure Act. So they did not follow the law when they rescinded it, and because they did not do it properly, the rescission was vacated. So those are all different words, but essentially to mean that DACA went back to its original and initial status from 2012 because the attempted rescission was not valid. However, a month passed and the Immigration Office has not given any direction on being able to file initial DACA applications, meaning people who had not had DACA previously, because maybe they weren't 15 yet, how they could go ahead and start applying for it. And so on last Friday, July 17th, another federal judge mandated that immigration accept initial DACAs and put the program back in place as it was in 2012. So it's only been since Friday, but if you go to the immigration page, they still have not issued any guidance on accepting initial DACAs or what can be done. But since two judges, or the Supreme Court and a federal judge, have now mandated that they put the program back to its original situation from 2012, we're hoping that within a number of days we'll have some type of guidance on how initial DACAs can be submitted. And then lastly, just DACA by the numbers, I think Bethany is going to talk about, no, you can go to the next slide, a lot of this, but what I wanted to point out more than anything was California, as on this chart, has over 200,000 DACA recipients. That's a huge number, and I know there's a lot of people from out of state on the webinar today, but to realize that maybe even though you don't think you know a DACA recipient, the reality is that with 200,000 DACA recipients in the state of California, chances are you actually do know a DACA recipient, and they seem American to you, and they seem American in every way, and that's because they are, except for the fact that our government, their true status. So with that, I'll hand it over to Bethany.
All right, thank you. I'm just answering. Someone asked what is USCIS. So just to clarify, USCIS is State Citizenship Immigration Services. So I wanted to kind of just share, how does this connect to us? What is the reality of who DACA recipients are? And like Christy said, even if you think that you don't know any DACA recipients, especially if you're living in California, in Orange County, you're interacting with DACA recipients all the time because they're really part of the fabric of our community. So let me just pull up my slides so I can see what I'm looking at. So just some stats to kind of, really ground us in who, how many, what's going on. There's nearly 800,000 people that have been approved for DACA at one point or another during its run since 2012. Currently, there's probably around 650,000 people that are protected under DACA. Obviously, this fluctuates as people expire, their work permits expire, or they, have pending renewals. The average recipient arrived to the U.S. at the age of 7 and has lived here for more than 20 years. So really, DACA is benefiting this very specific group of undocumented immigrants that entered the U.S. as young children. We have had clients that are DACA recipients that entered as 1 month old, at 1 month old, or 1 year old, or 2 year old. We've had very young, and then we've had some that entered at 10 or 11. It really depends, but it is really focusing on protecting the youngest, kind of protecting the group of immigrants that came as young children. DACA recipients represent around 150 different birth countries. So really from all over the world, we have DACA recipients in our country. But 80% were born in Mexico. And obviously that makes the most sense given that that is our closest neighbor besides Canada. DACA recipients and their households contribute around $5.7 billion in federal taxes and $3.1 billion in state and local taxes. Especially undocumented immigrants in general contribute billions of dollars in taxes every year, but specifically for DACA recipients, that they have valid social security numbers now and valid work permits, they're able to actually work higher paying, higher wage jobs and actually be able to contribute even more to the economy because they're earning more money. As opposed to without a work permit or without a valid social, and if they're working in the workforce, they're generally working very low wage jobs. So California has the largest population of DACA recipients by far. We have around 200,000 at any given time. The other state, and I can't even remember what state it was, but it was around 100,000. So we have by far the most DACA recipients in our state. And in Orange County alone, we have around 37,000 DACA recipients. So a pretty significant number of people in our community that receive DACA. And again, this is not even including those that would be eligible that maybe didn't apply before it was initially rescinded in 2017 or were too young to apply at that point. In the last couple of years, we have seen a handful of people, come into our office or call for consultations that, recently turned 16 or 17 and or 15 and were not of age to apply before it was rescinded in 2017. And unfortunately, because of that and where everything was with the courts, they weren't allowed to apply until maybe now. Like Christy said, everything is kind of still very much up in the air. So more important than any of these stats, it's really crucial to remember that each of these numbers represent individual human beings that have innate dignity and worth, despite how much they contribute to the economy. I think it's important to have those facts to understand that there is actually a very strong workforce. I think, and I can find the exact stat, but I believe it's like 98% are working, 98% of DACA recipients, so very low unemployment wage or unemployment number there. You know, despite all of that, it's important to know all of that, because when you're having conversations with people that maybe are not as open to DACA or permanent solution to DACA, that you are able to speak from a place of education and knowing the truth so that you can combat those lies that float around. It is important to know this, but regardless of this, even if DACA recipients were only a drain on the economy, it really, as human beings, it would be irrelevant to how we engage, how we treat, how we see and view and amplify the reality of DACA recipients, because they are image bearers. You know, for those of us that are followers of Christ, they are made in the image of God, and they have innate dignity and worth despite what their contribution is to the economy. For me personally, the ecosystem of my life is dependent on DACA recipients. And many of us that are connected to Solidarity or JOYA would probably say something similar. They're my friends, my next door neighbors, the tios and tias to my children. I have DACA recipients in my own family. So it's very personal to me, because I can't go a day without interacting or engaging with someone who has DACA. And so it's really specifically for Solidarity and JOYA. Many of our students are either DACA recipients or otherwise DACA eligible. And like I explained, maybe weren't able to apply initially, but otherwise would qualify and meet all of the qualifications. It's really, you know, when DACA was announced in 2012, is right when I kind of started the journey to opening Camino Immigration Services. And so it was the first thing that I did, the first type of immigration case that I worked on. And in those first few months, I personally did close to 75 DACA applications for young people in our neighborhoods. And these were kids that I had known, you know, many of them at the time were like late high school or in early college years. And they were, you know, young people that I had known for years at that point. And to be able to walk through that process with them was really, truly a gift. And just really displayed to all of us at Solidarity and then eventually JOYA how much the communities that we serve are impacted by this reality of being undocumented, number one, but specifically having DACA and being DACA eligible. So for me personally, given all of that, even as I get swept into policy and advocacy and numbers and the work of filling out the applications and gathering the evidence for these, you know, for this process to help people apply for DACA or renew their DACA, it's really imperative that I and all of us remember that we are talking about human beings. We're talking about people with faces and lives and families and jobs and goals and dreams that, you know, by far are working and hustling to really accomplish the American dream and accomplish the goals that they have for themselves. You know, when Solidarity started, probably close to a third of our students were undocumented and would have been eligible for DACA. And this would have been years before DACA, you know, was even a thing. So it's really an integral part of the population that we serve and that we work with. So if you're a supporter, you're a volunteer, you're a partner of Solidarity's, then this is an issue that we deal with on a daily basis, and then by default, it's an issue that you're connected to, and it's people that you're connected to and that you're helping to support and helping to contribute to their flourishing. And so we just really wanted to make sure that that we talk about that and that we understand, as important as the numbers and the facts are, that we really grounded in knowing and recognizing the humanity of these people that we care about deeply and that we love. So let's see here. Also, I want to say that when DACA was initially rescinded in 2017, Christy and I actually held a little dinner. We ordered a bunch of pizza, and I just put it out there on social media. Hey, if you have DACA and you want to just come and have a safe space to just lament and talk about how you're feeling in regards to the uncertainty of DACA and of your future, you know, we probably had about 25 kids that showed up in my house, my tiny little apartment, and we just, everyone was able to share, and we were able to kind of explain, you know, from the legal perspective what was going on. And one thing that one of our clients, and a young woman that I've known for many years, said, she said, it feels like, well, it's back to the shadows for us. And I apologize for getting emotional. I'm just gonna take a sip of my water. But that has stayed with me throughout the last 3 years. That idea of the communal trauma, the anxiety, the stress that these DACA recipients live with every single day, specifically since 2017 when it was rescinded, and going back and forth in court and unsure what the future held, and then with the Supreme Court, and then finally now this Supreme Court decision, which still leaves everything very much up in the air and so much uncertainty, that there is this fluctuation of every time they get a work permit, you know, their new work permit in the mail, a sense of relief, but knowing that there's a timeline, and that it's very likely that they'll be back in the shadows within 2 years. And as people that want to be allies, and as people that, you know, probably many of us claim to be followers of Jesus, that is unacceptable. That people in our church body, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our programs are living with the weight of that anxiety every single day is unacceptable. And even more so now, given the reality that we're in with the administration that we have and the uncertainty of things, it is very stressful. And so for us as people with privilege that don't have to worry about our immigration status, it is our job to be allies and to be good allies, not just say that we're allies, not just post something on social media, but really live into that reality of what does it mean to journey with this population of people in our community, and to do it well, and to recognize that there is a major risk that we're up against. It is no secret from every, head of DHS to head of ICE, there have been statements made that indicate that the plan is to deport DACA recipients once DACA is gone. That is not a secret. That's not a conspiracy theory. That is spoken from the mouth of those that make those decisions. And so we are at a crossroads, and will be very soon as a country and as allies, as what does our response look like if and when there is an effort to remove these people specifically from our country. And the reason it's such a great risk is because in the application for DACA, all of their personal information has been given to immigration. Their addresses, their phone numbers, anything that would be needed to locate them is free game for immigration. And even though that information is supposed to just stay with the USCIS office, there were emails that were leaked months ago that indicate that information is shared fluidly with ICE, and that there's nothing stopping ICE from accessing that information and removing, targeting DACA recipients. And I don't say that to stoke fear, especially if you have DACA and you're listening to this. I want you to know that there are thousands of us that are ready to put our bodies on the front line to protect that from happening to you. But specifically speaking to the allies, that we need to take that threat very seriously, and we need to be engaged and listening and paying attention to what's happening and checking in with our friends that have DACA, so that we are ready to act in a peaceful way to stop that from happening. And so I want to make sure that people understand where we're at and the risk that we're facing. And even the risk that we're facing for those that potentially would want to apply for DACA, for the first time, that it is a risk to now give their information to a government that is actively working to not, you know, have as many immigrants lawfully in our country. And so this is the reality that we're in. And so with all of that information, for the last couple minutes, I just want to give us some things to do and how we can actually really be allies. So the number one thing is support. If you have DACA recipients in your life that you already have an existing relationship with, ask them, check in with them, ask them how you can support them during this time. I don't recommend doing this with like random people that you don't have a relationship with. This would be specifically if you have a relationship with someone that has shared with you their status, that you make an effort to check in with them and to really just say, how can I support you? What does it look like for me to walk with you in this time? How can I be praying for you? You know, what do you need from your community during this time? The second thing is to advocate. We need to be calling and writing our representatives in Congress weekly, urging them to pass a permanent solution for DACA recipients. Personally, when I call and when I write, I ask for a path to citizenship for DACA recipients. And so we have a script that we will send out to those that indicate your interest in that, and so that you can use that to call and to write. When you call, people get very nervous, but when you call, you're literally talking usually to like a 19-year-old intern. So you're not, you know, there's nothing to be nervous about. You most likely have a lot more life experience than they do. The third thing is vote. Vote in November all the way down the ballot. This is just not talking about the president, although that is obviously an important election as well, but to really vote all the way down the ballot with DACA recipients in mind. Do the research. Where do these politicians stand on DACA, on immigration, on a possible DREAM Act, which would be, you know, some kind of permanent solution to DACA, and that's in Congress. That's in local government, because local and state government impacts the benefits that DACA recipients have as well. So please vote down ballot with DACA recipients in mind. The fourth is to give your money, to donate. It costs $495 every 2 years to renew DACA. And for those that are filing, you know, hopefully we'll be filing initial DACAs coming up, it's going to cost them $495. For a lot of these young people, that's a significant amount of money. And so if you are interested in covering the cost of that, that's something that at Camino we're going to be facilitating. We're going to be pairing donors with clients and getting those fees covered for our clients. And then the last thing here is learn more about our immigration system and DACA and how it's all connected, because there's so much more going on in our country that impacts DACA, but that is also much bigger than DACA. And so we'll have some resources for you as well to engage deeper, to learn more, and to really wrap your head around what is happening, what's the history of our immigration system, why are we in the situation that we're in right now with so much uncertainty and with immigration at the forefront of, you know, conversations from politicians all over the country, and how did we get here and how do we get out of here? We have a lot of resources that we'd love to share with you. And then this isn't on here, but if you're interested, if you're local and you're interested in helping us at Camino actually process DACA applications for our clients, we expect to be pretty overwhelmed with clients that want to renew or apply initially for their DACA in the next couple of weeks, depending on what happens with USCIS. And we are putting together a training for volunteers to be trained on how to put together the application, fill out all the forms, and obviously we'll be there to support and sign off on everything. But if that's something that you're interested in, please contact us, because we really do need all hands on deck for the next couple of weeks. And I think we're going to move into now, we've got only a couple minutes left. I'm not sure how many questions.
Well, yeah, I typed answers on several of them, but I did want to respond. Someone asked, how does receiving DACA change someone's life, and what difference does it make? So I'll speak from my personal knowledge, and then Bethany, you can speak, but absolutely 100% it changes the course of someone's life. So regularly, and I see a lot of educators are listening to this right now, and they can attest that if you meet a student who's undocumented, who has no social security number, as they reach their high school years and you ask them what their plans are, they will tell you they don't have plans, because they can't go to college, they can't go to community college, they can't access anything higher because they don't have a valid social security number. getting a social security number literally changes the course of someone's life, that then they can go to Fullerton Community College and be a California resident and go for free. It will literally change the course of someone's life. And then, I mean, lastly, just having a work permit, like Bethany alluded to earlier, letting someone come out of the shadows and not have to take a cash job or an under the table payment, that they can take all of the jobs that all the rest of us can get. I mean, I know personally there are DACA recipients who are now lawyers who've passed the bar. And that's a California Supreme Court made a decision that said, if you're undocumented, but you have DACA, and even if you're just plain undocumented, you can become an attorney. But unfortunately, that's not the same in every state. So we're in a state where we've kind of taken some exceptional steps towards supporting DACA recipients and undocumented folks. But I know for a fact there's other states where those don't exist. But Beth, do you want to say anything about how it changes someone's life?
Yeah, I'll just give kind of anecdotally. I remember in 2012 when I began helping people fill out their applications and submitting them to USCIS. I remember one of the first guys that got his approval, and I was able to give it to him. And I saw him a few weeks later in our neighborhood, and I said, "Let me see your driver's license." And that was a huge thing. Now in California, we have a law that allows anybody to get a driver's license regardless of their immigration status. But at that point, that was not on the books. And so that was a huge deal for him. I think he was 18 years old at the time. And to be able to have a driver's license and to have that freedom and to have that ID, to have an actual ID in the state that he had lived for most of his life was a huge deal. It's opened up so many doors. I mean, I can think of, probably close to 100 people that I know, off the top of my head right now that are pursuing careers in different things because of what DACA has allowed them to do. So the threat of that all being kind of ripped away from them, because they're working now in jobs like at banks or hospitals or schools or law firms, those are not the kind of jobs you can work at without a valid work permit or social security number. And so those things will be stripped away from them if DACA goes away permanently. So it has opened the doors, but those doors, are at risk of being closed on them. Trying to see in other questions. Where can we go to research how to vote well in November? The National Immigration Forum and also World Relief, the national office, they usually put out some pretty good stuff around election time where they've done some pretty balanced research on different politicians' views on immigration. But for local and state, I would just call their office and ask, where do you stand on these issues? Where do you stand on keeping driver's license available for immigrants in our state? Where do you stand on financial aid for DACA recipients? Where do you stand on DACA or permanent solution to DACA or path to citizenship? You have the right to ask those questions. They are not our leaders. We are the leaders. They represent us. And so their job is to lead based on on what the people that they're representing want to happen in Sacramento or in Washington, D.C. But definitely check out the National Immigration Forum and World Relief National Office. Follow their people on social media, and they usually put out really good stuff around election time.
Hey, Beth and Christy, we are at our limit of time. We were going to go up to 12:45. It's 12:47. I do want to leave this open just in case anybody else wants to hang on and still have some questions answered. But just to wrap things up before we do any more Q&A, like Beth was saying, our job is to help resource you guys to be the best allies that you can possibly be for the immigrant community, especially for DACA eligible people. And so we will be sending out resources after this. Make sure that the email that you registered with, I hope that that's a secure email and it's a real email, not a fake one. But you will be getting a copy of not only this webinar, but then we are also going to be sending you different resources depending on this last poll that I would love to take for you guys. So if you guys don't mind taking this end poll, out of the 5 or 6 options, how would you guys prioritize what your next best step is? If you don't mind filling that out, I'm going to keep it open for about a minute. And then during this time, there was one interesting question that I saw from, I think it was Kathleen. She was saying, do DACA people age out after 31, or is that just the application window?
Yeah, and I want to correct. So I actually wrote it, and then after I wrote it, I wanted to correct it, but I thought I was going to confuse myself even more. So to be 100% clear, you do not age out. So you just had to be under 31 on the day it was announced. So my second sentence in my response to that answer reads incorrectly. You didn't have to apply before you were 31. You simply had to be under 31 on June 15th of 2012. And as long as you met that age and the other requirements, then if we are going to be able to submit initial applications again, based on the Supreme Court decision, you could be 38 and still apply right now, as long as you met the requirements as it was initially announced in 2012.
Thank you for clarifying on that, Christy.
Yeah.
Kevin Doy asks a quick question. What is the latest on the path to citizenship? Has there been any sort of movement on that? Have you heard anything?
I just answered that question, but basically no. I mean, there were some bills, maybe last year or the year before. I believe one passed the House, but the Senate never brought it up. It's a moving target from what the president is saying he wants to see on his desk. So it's right now there's nothing, but I do suspect that there will be an increase in pressure to pass something if DACA is rescinded permanently.
Hannah also asked, I would love a list of questions I can ask my representatives if possible. Do you guys have a list like what you were mentioning, Beth? Do you think we could put something like that together for people?
Sure, we can add that with the script that we send out.
Okay. Sounds
and
good.
I'd also add to what Bethany was saying. I mean, a lot of people, because of the pressure of what's going on with immigration, a lot of individuals have just added their own like their ideas on their websites. So you may not find them on the National Immigration Forum, but if you go to a representative's website, sometimes they, like I know our local rep, Gil Cisneros, I mean, he has information on his stance on things on his website.
Yeah, very good. So I'm going to be closing this poll just to let everybody know the number one next priority best step that people are saying is they want to advocate, call or write to our representatives in support of DACA, which is an amazing thing. Thank you so much for supporting and your allyship in that sort of area. The second one is to go in November and vote with DACA friends in mind. So that leaves me feeling very, very hopeful. I'm going to end the poll right now. Beth and Christy, if there's any other last questions you guys would like to address or anything that you think would be helpful from the answered questions to answer publicly, we'll do that. And then if not, we will be closing.
Well, Terry asked if we have a date for our DACA training yet. I mean, I don't know, Beth would know more than I do, but I think we're waiting for guidance still from immigration about how and when they're going to accept initial DACAs. So we are gathering information from clients who are interested, but I don't know that we're going to process that until we have definitive evidence that they're accepting those applications and we know we're filling out the right form. And so, yeah, I don't know yet if we have a date for that.
Yeah, we were talking about Monday, just doing like an initial one on how to gather the evidence, but yeah, we have to really wait and see what's going to happen.
Christy, one last one for you. There was one of the questions that kind of rose to the top that people were voting on were that this is not only affecting Latinx communities, it's also affecting the Asian community, African community. So do you have any information how Asians are being processed for DACA? Is it different, or is there anything that you can speak to?
Yeah, that was a good question from Kevin. I don't know. I mean, I actually verified with Brianna. I was like, I don't think we have any Asian DACA recipients in our office, but I know for a fact that Kevin's stat was correct, that 1 in 7 Asian are undocumented in Orange County or something like that. And Bethany and I have a Orange County.
1 in 7 Asian immigrants are undocumented.
Yes. And so I definitely know that is an issue within the Asian community as well. I mean, fortunately, locally, we have the Korean Resource Center, which I know individuals who work at, and they process a ton of DACA applications. I also know there's an office on Cal State Fullerton campus that processes DACA applications for students. So there are a lot of local resources that could be servicing more of the Asian community than I guess our office is. And I have not heard personally from any immigration attorneys or anyone who works in the nonprofit world that Asian students or DACA recipients are processed any differently than Latinx recipients. Have you, Bethany? She's reading.
If they're being processed differently?
Yeah.
No, they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be, but who knows as far as, personal bias for those that are adjudicating those applications, who knows?
All right, last question before we wrap up comes from Alex Dobbs. Is there a broad-based network that we are, he says y'all, which I love, we're connected to for advocacy on immigration issues in DACA? Bethany, would you mind sharing about that?
Yes. Yeah, there's a couple. Nationally, we're part of CCDA, which has done a lot around DACA. We're also, I'm closely connected with the National Immigration Forum that has done a lot of advocacy around DACA, World Relief, and the Evangelical Immigration Table are all national kind of coalitions that are very engaged on this issue. And then locally, yeah, we're a part of an Orange County collective of immigration service providers that are very engaged in working on this issue. So we partner closely with organizations that are led by DACA recipients and kind of follow their lead for local advocacy. And the national advocacy, we're really connected with the national organizations. And we can share those resources with you offline if you want to reach out.
Okay, we are going to wrap up. Thank you guys so much. Bethany and Christy, thank you for sharing your guys' wisdom to everybody on this webinar. I just wanted to read one comment from Kathleen Fu. She said, thank you all very, very much for hosting this webinar. It's been the most helpful webinar about this topic that I've attended, and it's great to see the passion that you all have for your work. So I would definitely agree with that. I've learned so much from both you, Bethany and Christy. So thank you for educating us, and thank you for allowing your heart to lead in this way. And then also thank you for drawing our attention to the way that we feel the church should be moving in this direction, to care about those who can be sometimes overlooked or unseen. It's just so important as a part of our faith and our journey together as a church. Thank you guys so much for coming to this webinar. We appreciate you. We love you. We'll be sending out all these resources to you guys in the next week. So stay tuned for those and look for those.